what would that look like then, the whole mold detox? What does that entail?
Yeah, it's a process. So first you want to know which mold toxins you're dealing with. My preference is different ways of testing. My preference is to use the urine tests, and real time is the first one that I use. And then if somebody has the budget for it, I also use Great Plains. They have really good tests. There's one by Vibrant that is going through some evolution. I haven't seen consistency with it and the other tests, so I haven't used it right now, but some people do like to use that one. There are ways of testing for antibodies, and that's a whole different system of looking at it. I haven't found it as helpful in terms of guiding an approach, but it'll show you if you're having immune reactions to those. Never clear if that means present or past. So all that to say, you've got these different testing options. I found the urine to be the easiest to follow and to work with and to guide what to do. Then I was on a research team with Dr. Neil Nathan, who's a wonderful person to put on everybody's radar if you're not familiar with him. And he's my mentor and a friend of mine, and worked with him, Emily Givler and Joe Mather, and a group of us really combed the research. We were talking weekends and weekends of going through all of these papers to map out which binders bind best, which mycotoxins, based on what we know right now. And that'll keep changing, but what we know right now. And what we found is that they don't bind equally. So when we're talking about binders, we're talking about things like activated charcoal, bentonite clay, chlorella. There's a type of fiber called propylmannan that can be used. And there's prescription binders like Welchol and cholestyramine. So, and Saccharomyces boulardii, that's a beneficial yeast, also will bind aflatoxin, gliotoxin, zearalenone, but it doesn't bind, for example, ochratoxin as far as we know. So we want to have that testing so that we can see which of the binders are going to work for which molds this person has. And then these chemical structures for these mold toxins are very complex. So if anybody's taking chemistry and you remember seeing a molecular structure, they actually have lots of facets and sides. So you want to use as many different binders as you can tolerate to most effectively bound up that toxin to help your body move it out. If somebody only has mold toxins, that may be all they need, and maybe a little bit of detox support. So another big thing that we worked on with these research projects was Emily Givler and I mapped out which detox pathways in the liver work for which mold toxins. And that was huge because we were looking a lot at glutathione, but it's not used very much for molds. There's a pathway called glucuronidation that almost never talked about, but that gets supported with things like calcium deglucarate and dandelion, pterostilbene, which comes from type of wild blueberry. These kinds of things support that pathway. Rosemary supports that pathway. And most mold toxins need that to get processed in the liver, not glutathione. So then that may be enough if that's all somebody has, and they had short exposure and they weren't that sick. But for those of us that had a lot of exposure, we have the colonization, then we have to go on and do an antimicrobial phase. And that can include herbals. And then most people end up having to work up to some kind of prescription antifungal.
Okay, so that sounds really complex. So probably something that you need guidance on.
You want to be guided. It's really helpful to work with somebody who knows this area, who can help support. But I did put also a course together on this because it is so complex. And so I put the course together, it just steps people through the very beginning, the testing, how do you get your testing back, how do you look at it, how do you pick your binders, how do you pick your phase 2 supports, and then in the advanced level, I go into the prescription antifungal options. How do you stabilize your mast cells while you're doing all that? So it gives people the whole roadmap. It may not get them 100% of the info they need because some of it is case by case, but at least gives the really solid foundation where people can get going on that. Because you can't put it together on your own. I spent 3 years solid putting that course together.
Wow. Yeah, it's really comprehensive. I did take that course and
Oh,
I learned a
good.
lot. I was blown away. And I'm not real sciencey, I mean, it interests me because, obviously like it affects me. But maybe it's the brain fog. I have a really hard time kind of, picking out those, more technical things. So I really liked how you explained everything. It was very helpful.
Thank you. Yeah. And that's why I made the workbook so people can just put down for themselves what their step is, what they need to do. I remember what it was like to be brain fogged, and I couldn't read a book.